Good morning, colleagues. Mashile, will you please make me co-host so that I can record the meeting? And please don't start recording. Morning, hi. Can you please
I'm
make
good.
me co-host as well? And
Yes,
then, yeah, please
Estelle.
don't start recording before I have, otherwise I can't start. I'll start just after 25 past to record, and then you can also start, but I need to record first to my computer, please, when I'm
Yes.
Thank
All
you.
right, Estelle. Yeah. Okay. After 25 past, ne?
Yes.
Sure, Estelle.
Good morning, Secretariat. I just want to test our sound from your side. Good morning, anyone that can test the sound for me on your side?
Hi, good morning. You sound is audible, not very clear though.
Okay, I'm a very soft speaker, but thank you, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Cindy. Are you still there?
Recording in progress. Lubabalo.
Hello, Chair. It's Mashile.
Hi, Mashile.
Morning, Chair.
How are you?
I'm good, in yourself?
So the time is already, it's exactly 12:30.
Yes.
Can we start?
Yes, we can start, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody on the platform. Welcome to this joint sitting of finance committees, both from the National Assembly and from the National Council of Provinces. Good afternoon, chairpersons, Honorable Eunice, Honorable Maswangai, Honorable Mashangu. We are welcome. Honorable members of the committees in both houses, Honorable Minister of Finance, Honorable Enoch Kotongwane, Deputy Minister, Honorable Dr. David Masondo, MECs present, Director General of National Treasury, Dr. Duncan Peterse, and Team Treasury, our support staff, members of the media present, ladies and gentlemen. As I've said, we are meeting to get a post-budget briefing and interaction with the Minister of Finance and his team about the budget that he presented yesterday. Before I let the Minister come in, can I check with you, Lubabalo, the apologies that we are having from your side?
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson, for this opportunity. From my side, Chairperson, we have an apology from Honorable Moss, apology from Honorable Dutoit, Honorable Neta, and the apology from the Chairperson and the whole Portfolio Committee of Finance in the Northern Cape, and also Honorable Ndabeni, Eastern Cape Provincial Chairperson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Perhaps let me again. I was not aware that the chairpersons of the portfolio committees of finance from the provinces are on the platform. Honorable members, we are most welcome. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, Lubabalo. Alan, any apologies from your side?
Good afternoon, Chair. No apologies, except Dr. George would need to leave the meeting early. Thank you.
We'll note that. Thank you so much. Mashile?
Yes, Chair, we don't have any apology from the standing committee at the moment, Chair.
Perfect. Yeah, then we can go to the next item. We, as I said, that we are going to have the Minister of Finance and his team making a presentation to us, post-budget presentation, after which we'll allow deliberations, questions on the issues that would have been raised by the Minister and his team. But before I allow the Minister to come in, let me take this opportunity to congratulate the Minister and Team Treasury for the budget presented yesterday under very difficult macroeconomic conditions. Minister of Finance, Honorable Kotongwane, please come in. I think we would like to give you a maximum of 45 minutes, but if you can do it less than that, so much the better. Thank you.
You're going to present? Oh, no, then I'm not going to the law.
Yes. Okay.
Good afternoon, chairs and members of the Joint Standing Committee. Thank you for the opportunity. Maybe what we should do is to allow the DG to make a presentation. Then thereafter, we can take some questions. With your approval, Chair.
Perfect, Minister. Proceed.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning, honorable chairs and honorable members. Duncan Peterson here, the DG of the Treasury. I am also joined, honorable members, by the Treasury team. They are joined online, and they are all present today and will be available to answer any questions that may arise after the presentation. We have just requested the parliamentary colleagues to assist us by making Nokwanda the co-host, so that she's able to project the presentation from her side. And as soon as the presentation is projected, we can start. Perhaps what I can do in the meantime, Chair, with your permission, is just give a bit of an overview of what the budget entails and speak to that briefly while we wait for the presentation to be put onto the screen. May I proceed, Chair?
Proceed. Gee, I'm in your hands until 45 minutes. Then you bring back the meeting. You'll continue the way you want to do it on your side.
Okay, perfect. No, thank you, Chair. So I'll proceed with the key messages of the budget. As I said, while we wait for the colleagues to just put the presentation up on the screen. I think the point that the Minister repeatedly emphasizes is the fact that we understand that we need much higher levels of growth in order to create the kind of jobs that we need in order to bring the unemployment rate down more substantially. And in this regard, the budget prioritizes macroeconomic stability, structural reforms, and the improvement of state capacity in order to improve the environment, both for public investment, but also for private investment, so that we can get the economy to grow and deliver the jobs required. Broad reforms are underway in energy, freight, water, and telecommunications. And we are confident that as those reforms are implemented, they will start yielding the benefits that we need in order to sustain the right kind of growth in jobs and the inclusivity of the growth that is required. We ensure that we can achieve our development aims through sustainable finances. The government will protect critical services while supporting economic growth through reforms and public investment, and ensuring that at the same time, we can still stabilize public debt. Every 6 rand out of the 10 rand that is allocated in the budget, so 60 cents in the rand of the budget, is allocated to the social wage. The social wage includes spending on health, education, social protection, community development, and employment programs. So the bulk of this budget ensures that the social wage is maintained, and in addition, staff levels in critical services, education, health, police, justice, and defense are protected. We are staying the course to narrow the budget deficit and stabilize debt. For the first time since 2008-2009, the government will achieve a primary budget surplus, which is when revenue exceeds non-interest expenditure, and that will allow us to stabilize debt in 25-26 at 75.3%, and thereafter it will decline. We acknowledge that the rapid growth in debt service costs chokes the economy and public finances because of the manner in which it consumes a very large share of our revenue. And therefore, because of the way in which debt service costs are crowding out important social expenditure, we believe that reducing debt service costs is critical for growth and development. On the next slide, honorable members, we always start the fiscal framework with the global growth environment, because that has a big influence on how, as an economy, we perform given the interrelationships between ourselves and other countries around the world. Global growth is forecast at 3.1% in 24 and 3.2% in 25. We do expect global inflation to continue declining due to restrictive monetary policy, softening labor markets, and the easing of supply side constraints. We do, however, acknowledge that our domestic growth prospects remain hamstrung by subdued prices for key export commodities and subdued global demand, which is how the global demand back into our domestic outlook. On the next slide, honorable members, we talk about domestic growth, and we share the real GDP outlook over the medium term. Next slide, please. Our GDP forecast has lowered to 0.6% due to the weaker than expected outcomes in Q3 of last year. We are all aware of what those headwinds are. On the previous slide, sorry, Nokwanda. We are all aware of what those headwinds are in power cuts, operational and maintenance failures, in freight rail and at ports, and high living costs. Over the medium term, our growth is forecast to be 1.6%. Our medium to longer growth outputs, however, is a function of our ability to improve capacity in energy, freight rail, ports, and continuing to reduce other barriers to economic activity. Next slide talks about the fact that we have been able to progress our structural reform agenda. There are several reforms that Operation Vulindlela has worked on with the help of the various policy departments, as well as the presidency, in ensuring that we deal with some of the binding constraints to our growth. And this includes many of the reforms that the honorable members will be aware of. The Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill that has allowed us, that is currently in the National Assembly, that will allow us to create a competitive market for electricity. The National Transmission Company Board that was appointed, which allows us to finally separate the various business units of Eskom and create more transparency in their business. Of course, we have also amended Schedule 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act, which has allowed us to unlock large-scale energy projects to the value of 6,000 megawatts. There's the Freight Logistic Roadmap that was approved by Cabinet, which addresses, as the Minister liked to say, the constraints in logistics and transforming the logistics sector, rather than focusing on the needs and challenges of a particular entity. We have achieved all the milestones in the telecommunication sector, and in addition, we've been able to introduce the National Water Infrastructure Agency Bill, which will allow us to create much better outcomes in terms of our water infrastructure needs. On the next slide, we always conclude the economic section with a reminder of what the risks are. Globally, if geopolitical tension in the Middle East escalates, spikes in the oil price can obviously feed through into the South African economy in the form of higher fuel prices and imported inflation. China, which is our largest trading partner, if they continue to experience growth challenges, that will affect us. On the upside, however, if we have global inflation that falls faster than assumed, then we can have the abatement of some of the restrictive monetary policy that requires us to deal with inflation. And as monetary policy becomes more accommodative, that can assist, obviously, our own environment. Risk to the domestic outlook includes the well-known challenges in electricity, freight rail, and ports. If we continue to experience challenges with our sovereign credit risks, that will increase borrowing costs, which will feed through in domestic interest rates. However, if domestic growth, if there's less load shedding rather, then our domestic growth outlook can in fact improve. as well as if we have faster than expected resolution of the rail and port constraints. In terms of the fiscal strategy on the next slide, what is our medium-term fiscal strategy? Well, we remain on course, as the Minister highlighted yesterday, with the medium-term fiscal strategy that we outlined in the 23 MTBPS. We've committed to a balanced approach to fiscal consolidation, which includes both expenditure strengths, but also moderate revenue increases in order to ensure that we can continue to fund critical services. As indicated in the 2023 MTBPS, fiscal consolidation includes tax policy measures of 15 billion in the fiscal year 24-25. We are making net reductions to main budget non-interest expenditure of 80 billion over the medium term, but we are also at the same time over the medium term proposing additional spending of 57.6 billion to ensure that we are able to pay the salaries of teachers, nurses, doctors, and the many other public servants, in particular in the personnel-intensive departments. And as we indicated earlier in our key messages, over the medium term, 60% of consolidated non-interest spending goes to the social wage. We will achieve a primary budget surplus in the current year, which is the first time we are able to ensure that revenue exceeds non-interest expenditure since 2008-2009, and this surplus will grow over the medium term. This will enable the government to curb the trend of rising debt service costs, which will peak at 21.3% of revenue and decline thereafter. We have also, after extensive technical work and consultation, including with the IMF and in collaboration with the Reserve Bank, decided to further mitigate fiscal risks by reducing borrowing using a portion of the valuation gains in the gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve account, also known as JAFECRA. Over the medium term, this debt stabilizing primary budget surplus that we are able to announce for the first time in 23, achieve for the first time in 23-24, will anchor fiscal policy. The Minister also mentioned the fact that after extensive consultation, we will propose a binding fiscal anchor, but in the interim, a debt stabilizing primary budget surplus will anchor fiscal policy. On the next slide, we provide an update on tax revenue projections, which are revised slightly in 23-24, but more significantly over the MTF. In 23-24, tax revenue is expected to be 1.73 trillion, which is 56 billion rand below our budget expectations. However, over the medium term, due to increased personal income tax collections and additional revenue proposals, we do expect medium-term revenues to improve over the period from 1.7 in the current fiscal year to 2.1 trillion in the outer year of the fiscal framework. In the next slide, we talk a little bit about what the actual adjustments are that underpin the additional 15 billion in revenue. And we have, of course, also articulated those in detail yesterday. No inflation adjustments to personal income tax tables and medical credit tax credits, above inflation increases in excise duties on alcohol and tobacco. And as in the 2022 and 23 budgets, we are not increasing the general fuel levy or the RAF levy, which provides tax relief of 4 billion. These measures will have permanent revenue effects, which feeds through over the medium term. We are also introducing a global minimum tax rule through a specific separate piece of legislation that the Minister tabled yesterday to protect the corporate tax base and limit tax competition. And this will increase, or according to our estimates, tax collection by 8 billion in 26-27. All of these are partly offset by the cost associated with the investment incentives we are providing in the form of 150% accelerated depreciation allowance for the production of electric vehicles, in addition to the other incentives that exist for automotive manufacturing. On the next slide, this chart, honorable members, just shows the implications of the current tax policy stance for our tax to GDP ratio, which stabilizes over the medium term, reaching 25.3% by 26-27. We have in the past had some gains from high commodity prices over the last 2 years, but we believe that those gains are not going to be available to us going forward, but that the tax policy measures we are announcing will lead to improved medium-term revenue. Next, just to reflect very briefly on the changes to the main budget, non-interest expenditure. Non-interest expenditure decreases by a net 6 billion since the 23 budget, mainly as a result of proposed reductions to baselines, declared unspent fund, projected underspending, drawdowns of the contingency reserves, and the contribution of provisional allocations that are not assigned to votes. We have indicated previously that we are adding to the baseline of labor-intensive departments additional funding to ensure that they are able to accommodate the full extent of the wage agreement and therefore continue to employ the doctors, nurses, police, and other critical personnel that we need in order to protect our core service delivery areas. The medium-term adjustments to the main budget are summarized on the next slide. As we indicated earlier, net reductions over the medium term amount to 80 billion, which consists of proposed reductions of 206 billion to departmental baselines, a drawdown of the unallocated reserve that was set aside in the 2023 budget. But the proposed reductions are exceeded by the spending additions of 251 billion over the medium term, mainly for the carry-through cost of the 2023 wage agreement to cover the salary bill in critical core service delivery departments. We are, of course, continuing with some of our controls in order to ensure that headcounts can be managed going forward, including considering things like the controls on payroll systems to ensure that departments are able to operate within their allocated budgets. The next slide then brings us to the total consolidated spending, which is expected to increase from 2.3 trillion to 2.6 trillion in 26-27. In terms of the average spending growth, the fastest growth is over the medium term by economic classification is in capital payments, followed by debt service costs. Capital payments are growing by 10% over the medium term, followed by debt service costs at 7.3%, which again emphasizes the need for us to continue to ensure that our fiscus is managed prudently and sustainably so that we can ensure that the debt service cost growth does not erode critical services. In terms of total consolidated government spending, the largest over the medium term, the largest component goes to learning and culture, 1.5 trillion in total over the medium term, followed by debt service costs at 1.2 trillion. On the next slide, we talk a bit about the division of revenue. Provinces and municipalities are allocated 2.8 trillion of total non-interest spending. National government transfers more than half of nationally raised revenues to the 9 provinces and the municipalities. There are some differences between what was tabled at the time of the 2023 budget due to a combination of the consolidation measures that we've announced, as well as the impact of the 2023 public service wage agreement, which of course, because of the provision that we've made, in particular in health and education, has an impact on the budgets of the provinces. We are ensuring that the provinces are going to be able to fund the wages of teachers, nurses, doctors, and other critical skills that are essential for service delivery. In terms of the government gross borrowing requirement, it is projected to decrease over the MTF. It is consists, of course, of our transfers to Eskom, which we announced last year. Although our transfers to Eskom are coming down from 78 billion to 76 billion in the current year and 66 to 64 billion in the next year, due to Eskom's inability to sell the Eskom Finance Company, we have reduced their transfers by 4 billion over 2 years. The implementation of the JAFECRA settlement methodology, which is new and which we've spoken about, reduces our borrowing needs over the next 3 years, with 100 billion in the first year of the medium term and 25 billion in each of the 2 outer years. Average net treasury bill issuance will be about 38 billion over the 3 years, and international borrowing will include $2.4 billion from global institutions. And as we've indicated before, we will continue to look for the cheapest sources of financing, including the loans that we continue to get from our international development banks and other multilateral institutions. On the next slide, we explain what we are doing with JAFECRA and how we are changing the JAFECRA methodology. JAFECRA, as we've indicated in the budget, is an account that houses the gains and losses from the foreign exchange reserves that the Reserve Bank has. These and losses have grown, and they have mainly been gains over the last many years because of the way in which the currency has depreciated. Although in 2003, when the currency strengthened, we actually had to pay the Reserve Bank 28 billion due to the obligations that the National Treasury has as part of this arrangement. So there's an account with these valuation gains, and we are introducing with the Reserve Bank a new framework to reduce government borrowing and ensure that our practices in managing this account is aligned with international norms and best practice, because our current JAFECRA arrangement is unusual. And so in order to bring it in line with what other countries do, we are changing the arrangement. The way we are reforming it is that it consists of 3 buckets. The first bucket retains enough funds in order to cover potential exchange rate fluctuations. That is the JAFECRA buffer. The second bucket, which is the Reserve Bank contingency reserve, ensures central bank solvency is not compromised and that the costs associated with using JAFECRA can be serviced by the Reserve Bank so that it does not interfere with interest rates. And in the third bucket are the distributions that will be made to the National Treasury, 100 billion in the first year, followed by 25 billion in the 2 outer years. We want to be sure that the JAFECRA reform is governed by several key principles. Amongst those, we consider the following to be quite important. A, the Reserve Bank's policy solvency should not be compromised by any JAFECRA distribution, which is why we are making the contingency reserve amount available to the SARB. Secondly, there should be no sales of foreign exchange reserves to realize JAFECRA gains, in particular because those reserves are below estimated adequacy levels. There should be no distribution of JAFECRA balances that could be unwound by a currency appreciation against the dollar, which is why we are retaining a JAFECRA buffer. And any distribution should be governed by a framework that is institutionalized, that rules out ad hoc decisions, and that can ensure that there is transparency. And then finally, the JAFECRA, to the extent that it is used in the fiscal framework, should be used to reduce government borrowing, which is what we outlined in Chapter 7 of the budget review tabled yesterday. What does all of this mean in the next slide for government debt to GDP? As we indicated earlier, government debt is expected to peak at 75.3% of GDP in 25-26 and decline thereafter. This is an improvement on the debt to GDP path that we announced at the time of the MTBPS, and that is mainly due to the way in which JAFECRA is being used to bring down the gross borrowing requirement. So in effect, what we are saying is that in aligning our approach to JAFECRA with our peers and with international best practice, that has translated into a better gross loan debt outlook over the next period. On the next slide, we just remind honourable members of the impact of growing service costs. Debt service costs continue to absorb more than 20 cents of every rand in revenue, which is why it's so important for us to ensure that we maintain the fiscal path that is outlined in the budget review that is being tabled in Parliament. On the next slide, the consolidated budget deficit is projected to narrow from 4.9% of GDP in 23-24 to 3.3% by the end of the MTF period. And this is a very important part of our of us ensuring that there is fiscal sustainability over the medium term. Consolidated non-interest expenditure will contract at an annual average rate of 0.5% in real terms. However, the budget ensures that there is limits to any reductions to key services. What does that mean? The budgets for basic education, health, and police are projected to grow in nominal annual average terms of 4.7%, 3.4%, and 5.4% over the MTF. Spending on community and economic development will grow 4.5% and 6.3% respectively, and spending on general public services grows marginally over the medium term. So the balance here is that we are ensuring sustainable fiscal finances while protecting core service delivery areas. Another major area that the minister announced yesterday was the focus on public investment, which is on the next slide, and how it is being prioritized through a series of different reforms, including a new public-private partnership framework that was published for public comment this week, as well as a new set of institutional arrangements. The budget itself already prioritizes capital budgets with a greater than inflation growth in capital investment over the medium term. Total infrastructure investment over the next 3 years amounts to 943 billion. However, it is our view that we are able to get more value for money from our infrastructure spend if we improve the quality of public investment. And therefore, we are introducing several reforms, including consolidating various financing, preparation, and planning arrangements for large projects into a single entity to crowd in private sector finance and expertise. We are going to increase the use of PPPs to deliver infrastructure projects by building a much more robust PPP pipeline, which is why the PPP framework was tabled for public comments this week, with very particular amendments to address the challenges in this space and to ensure that we reduce fragmentation and duplication across the different spheres of government. We want to coordinate the preparation and planning of large projects, including being able to draw on private financial institutions to fund large and catalytic projects, and to ensure that the implementing agencies have the right PPP technical support in order to execute the projects on their side and build the pipeline required. Some of the amendments for public comments will encourage more regular use of PPPs and include proposals like granting exemptions for projects valued below 2 billion from obtaining multiple approvals, as well as limiting the ability of accounting officers to cancel key projects that have passed the feasibility stage. On the last slide, before we get to the conclusion, we just remind honorable members of the fact that our state-owned companies remain in distress due to weak governance, financial strain, and poor operational performance. Because of the struggles of many of our state-owned companies and their inability to access capital markets, they are increasingly requesting bailouts and guarantees, which have become another mechanism that has crowded out critical social spending. The first chart shows how those recapitalizations, the bailouts, have ballooned over the years. And that is why we are moving to a position where we are attaching strict these guarantees when they arise, and ensuring that entities that are not meeting those conditions either do not get the bailouts that have been penciled in or access to the guarantees, or in some cases, as we've done with Eskom, we reduce the way in which the fiscal framework supports them. And it's important to note that this is in fact in response to a call from various parliamentary committees that have asked us repeatedly to please ensure that we manage the guarantee portfolio in particular much more strictly and in line with much tougher conditions. So in conclusion, honorable chairs and members, I won't repeat everything on this slide. This is the final slide of the presentation. And what it simply does is it reminds us of our key messages, which is that economic growth is still not sufficient due to the various challenges that we know are there, which we discussed in this presentation. However, we are putting forward a fiscal path that we believe will ensure fiscal sustainability and will help us to bring down debt service costs over time, so that we address the manner in which debt service costs is crowding out critical social spending. And at the end of the presentation, honorable members, we end with the major risks to the fiscal framework, which I'm sure all the honorable members are aware of. Thank you, Honorable Chair. That concludes the presentation from our side. And of course, myself and the Treasury team are here to answer any questions that may be required of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DG. Honorable Minister, DM, anything before I allow honorable members to come in?
No. I think the one full of time. Let's proceed, Honorable Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister and DG, for the presentation. Honorable members, let's see who would like to have a go. Okay. Honorable members, as you know, we've got 4 committees meeting here. So I'll request that without constraining you, that you try to be brief in raising your questions or making your point, so that you can allow other oral members to also make their points. That will be my request. I see Honorable George, Honorable Dennis Ryder, and Honorable Willie Ocamp, the 3 of them. Then after that, I'll take the next, the next hands. Okay, let me just see. I may as well. I see Honorable Moletsane and Honorable Alexander. Let me stop there. Let's start, Honorable George.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks very much to the presenters. I will heed your call, Chair, to be brief. I have set out what my views are on the budget already in my alternative budget and also yesterday several times. So I think that's pretty clear. I do have a question, and it is for the Minister. And this is the question. We've already said, we being me, that we do not support what is in effect a bailout from the Reserve Bank's reserve to relieve a small portion of the government's runaway debt. Has the reform the Minister mentioned been agreed with the Governor? And when will we get the detail of that plan? Because it isn't clear. Thank you, Chair.
The next member, I've called you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Minister, it appears that even though it's a difficult job presenting the budget, there's a lot of people that want to take the job away from you. So we had, again this year, a couple of people trying to steal some of your thunder before the budget. So if you can just comment on two of those particularly. The first is Dr. Joe Partla, who spoke about the employment of doctors and said that you were going to make a big announcement in terms of your budget. I don't really see that in the health budget. So if you can perhaps respond to his comments on your job. The second, of course, was Premier Lesufi, who made two fairly bold statements in his State of the Province address. The first being that 8 billion rand was going to be pumped into the economy of Mfuleni, the Vaal economy, through DTI. I don't see that money in the budget either. And the second, of course, was the fact that e-tolls would be done away with, and the gantries were about to be turned off. And I think he gave it a month, within a month that would happen. Can you comment on whether the e-tolls matter has been put to bed finally and everyone's in agreement? The next point I'd like to ask about, and I think Dr. George has already alluded to it, relates to the raiding of the Golden Foreign Exchange Reserve account. Now, listen quite carefully to two interviews with the DG yesterday, where he said that there won't actually be any sale of assets in terms of realizing the money that's put in that reserve. Now, I mean, the fact is that reserve comprises unrealized gains. So how is Treasury intending to monetize those reserves without actually cashing in, selling the Kruger Rand or whatever it is, without doing that? How are you going to monetize it? I understand you're stretching it over 3 years, which I'm not sure if that's a good idea or not. But there's just a lack of clarity, and certainly on the interviews, I think that the responses were very couched in technical terms and a little bit of obfuscation, which always leads to negative sentiment, distrust, and of course rumors. So if we can get some clarity on that right now. On the same point, the 100 reserve account, or a contingency account, I think it was called, the contingency account with the Reserve Bank. I'm just not sure if, what the point of that is. If it's already sitting as a reserve in the Reserve Bank's books, now we're going to put it as a contingency reserve in the Reserve Bank books. I'm not sure what the purpose of that is, other than just to send a message to say, look, we're being reasonably prudent. The last question I have, Chair, relates to the Hail Mary aspect of the budget, relating to the revenue projections. And of course, the tax projections are showing us returning back to the heydays of the platinum and commodities windfalls. projecting an increase of 130 billion rand, when really we've only spoken to about, if we're lucky, 20 billion, maybe 40 billion, if you want to be kind, in terms of revenue enhancing strategies. Where's the rest of that revenue growth going to be driven from? Thank you very much, Chair and Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Ryder. Honorable Okam, please come in.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you also for the Minister for being here. Chairperson, firstly, our GDP growth are now standing at 0.6%, down from a forecasted 0.8%. And the forecast for the 24 to 2026 years is a growth of 1.6%. Now, we are like an archer that aims for a target that's very low, but we keep on missing that target. So my first question is, what will this time make things different? And how sure are you that we will this time hit the very low target of 1.6% GDP growth? Because it seems that we always got these projections, but we get it missed every time. Secondly, with regards to the debt service cost, we all know that debt service cost is really out of hand. We've been warning about that for many years now. In 1 year, our budget deficit worsened from 4% to 4.9% of the GDP, and this led to our debt service cost to rise to 382 billion rands per annum, which is more than 20% of the revenue that we get in. Now, apart from taking money from our piggy bank or the JFECRA, what other measures will be implemented over the next 3 years to bring these figures down significantly? Because we cannot have business as usual and take money from JFECRA and think that a lot of our problems will now be solved. We need to get plans implemented that will, in the long term, have a reduction in our debt service cost. Then, Honourable Minister, to you, you said in your speech that rooftop solar is one of the important aspects that will improve the security of electricity supply. Yet, and this brings me to my question, why then is there no increase in the amount that can be claimed back from SARS for the installation of rooftop solar in order to encourage and make it easier for people to install solar systems and then alleviate the pressure that is going to be on government itself? Or on Eskom with regards to electricity supply. Then, with regards to the 15% tax on multinational corporations for revenue more than 750 million euros, will this not deter investment into South Africa, and what will the effects thereof be? With regards to the NHI, Honourable Minister, you said that this allocation demonstrates government's commitment to this policy. But we all know that the NHI will require much, much more than 1.4 billion rand. You also included a number of key enablers that still must be undertaken before the NHI can be rolled out to scale. It is clear that we don't have the money to pay for the NHI. Where will the money come from? And secondly, will it not be better for government to get all the requirements that you spoke of in place and show that there is money to execute the NHI bill before the President signs that into law? Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Okam. I have got the Chairperson, Honourable Maswanganyi, would like to come in. He's struggling with his connectivities. Can I allow him before you, Honourable Letsan and Honourable Alexander? Chairperson Maswanganyi, please come in. Maswanganyi? Chairperson? Okay. I'm sure he's that's what he complained about his connectivity. Team Treasury Minister DG, please mute yourselves there. Yeah, please mute yourselves in the office. We can hear you. Honourable Letsane, please come in. I was asking that you mute yourselves. Yeah, Honourable Letsane, please come in.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me apologize for not switching on my video. Where I am, the network is very poor.
It's okay.
Let me first start, Chairperson, by acknowledging the presentation. Minister, as we are sitting presently with a challenge of social workers who are unemployed and their services are highly needed. And they have even marched last year to try and give attention to the government that they are available and unemployed. Secondly, Minister, we do have qualified doctors who are unemployed, while the country is experiencing the shortage of doctors, and they even must also now recently to bring it to the attention of the government that they are here available and unemployed. Minister, the expectation was that in your budget speech, you will give or you will mention this matter and give it attention to resolve it as a matter of urgency. But unfortunately, your budget was silent on those issues. How are you going to give these matters attention to resolve them as a matter as soon as yesterday? Because the country needs those social workers, the country needs those doctors, because their services are highly in demand. Thank you, Chairperson.
Chairperson. Chair.
Okay. I'm sure the chairperson has a difficulty in connection. I think we'll proceed from this point. Are you back, Chair?
Yeah, thanks, Honorable Kaiso. Yes, I'm in. I had called Honorable Alexander.
Thank you, Chairperson. My question is, the obvious lack of support for the vulnerable South Africans is quite evident in the budget. There's no relief for South Africans that have been hard hit by the cost of living. There's no adjustments been made to the tax bracket for inflation, which in essence will be felt by the taxpayer, the man on the street, as an increase. In November last year, this committee agreed to increase the grocery basket on zero VAT-rated food items, which is greatly needed to assist these vulnerable communities to help make ends meet. The budget hasn't taken into consideration the committee's recommendation around increasing this basket of zero VAT-rated items. And I would like to find out how the minister is going to find ways to actually put in the budget some measures to ease the burdens that the vulnerable South Africans are feeling in this day and age. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Alexander. Orma Swanganya, are you there? Okay. Honorable Kaiso, please come in.
Shenga, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Honorable Swanganya. Please come in.
Okay. Thanks very much, Shenga, Chairperson. Also acknowledge the co-chairpersons, Comrade Eunice and Comrade Dikeledi, the Minister, Deputy Minister, colleagues from NA, NCOP, and provinces. Let me acknowledge and welcome the budget that has been tabled by the Minister yesterday, which has been warmly welcomed by the public despite the challenges. And it's good that the Minister did not hide that there are challenges in regard to the fiscal outlook currently. He went into details to outline those challenges, amongst which is the shortfall in revenue, which we'll have to deal with as to what do we do in that circumstance. Let's accept that, acknowledge that there's 2 billion rand, for instance, that will be rolled out to deal with the issue of smart prepaid. This has been a problem. I think areas like Soweto, which are supplied electricity by Eskom, there's a high rate of illegal connectivity. I'm just giving an example. It's something that have to be dealt with. And also, let's acknowledge that the minister has allocated 57.6 billion to pay for the salaries of the teachers, nurses, doctors, and other critical services, which are very, very, very important. And the increase of the old age pension fund, which has been warmly welcomed by the elderly, and the infrastructure rollout, which is quite very critical for the economy. It is going to ignite economic growth, which is quite very low now, create employment, more especially for young people. The minister, in terms of GFECRA, has gone into detail in his speech as to how this GFECRA is going to be managed and why is it important at this stage. Because he makes it very clear that a new settlement arrangement is being introduced that will reduce government borrowing and improve the Reserve Bank's equity position. And ultimately, South Africa will be brought closer to its peers and ensure alignment of international best practice. So he went into detail to outline what GFECRA is all about and has introduced the bill. And I don't see any negative effect that this is going to bring to the fiscal outlook. Instead, it is going to bring us closer to our peers internationally and also align with the international best practice. So if this is bringing South Africa closer to the peers and align South Africa to international best practice, why don't we welcome that, Chairperson? I find it problematic if we are just negative because maybe we have got ulterior motives that we don't know. But all in all, let's acknowledge and welcome the budget presented, tabled by the minister, despite the challenges that are like the revenue shortfall, that I think the minister will outline how we deal with it together with SARS. Thanks.
Honorable Co-Chairperson, thank you very much. Honorable Kaiso, can you please come in?
Yes, Honorable Chair, I don't think my network will be so powerful if you could let me switch my video off.
But for now,
such that
for now, we can hear very well, Honorable Kaiso. If you strike, then you may.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much, Chair, and let me also acknowledge the presentation made by the ministry together with the entire office, officials from the Treasury and other members of the committees in various provinces present. Would really appreciate the presentation which has been made. Let me first explain, take the cue from what the chairperson of the co-chairperson has said in his introduction in welcoming the budget. Also explain the circumstance around which the budget has been pronounced and being as a tool to intervene in the current situation of the economy, and appreciate all those intervention areas which have been mentioned there. Yes, I don't want to go back there, Chair, that has been explained. Chair, if I may start, I just want to ask how is achieving the primary budget surplus beneficial for the economic growth or stimulating the economy of the country? And what has the National Treasury considered the economic policies to grow the economy and reduce the debt without, implementing the fiscal consolidation, which has not assisted actually in the growing the economy over the past 10 years? And my third question is, what are the possibilities of any of national treasuries tapping into the reserve held up by the, for instance, unemployment insurance fund, government employee pension fund, to fund industrialization and capitalize DFIs and stimulate the economy to enable inclusive growth. The fourth question would be, Chair, what are the interventions in place to expand the illicit financial flows from, illicit financial flows framework to combat the shifting of profit base and illicit financial flows to grow our revenue base? Because we have been having this problem, although one understands that there's a task force which deals with this, but you know, there has to be a very clear, you know, framework which is achievable that will deal with this to increase the revenue base. The financial sector currently has assets estimated to be about 21 trillion rand, which is not being reinvested in the economy. What are the possibilities of the Treasury, you know, levying progressive taxes on these assets? I think it's very important. So on the last two questions that I may ask is, has the National Treasury been able to reduce the extent to which the reduction in corporate tax from 28 to 27% impacts on the shortfall in revenue collection? Has the reduction in corporate taxes been able to yield the benefits of increased investment in the economy by the private sector? And last one, Chair, is on the issue that has been raised during the presentation that Eskom has not been able to sell its Eskom company. I think it's an old method, this one, at this stage. But I just want to understand from the ministry, what has been the problem around Eskom not being able to do that up to this far? Yes, I understand on the issue of GFRECRA used to reduce government borrowing. I think from the start it was a good one would welcome this, that at least on the foreign exchange reserve there's a movement, a positive movement. But what one would have expected even more, that it would also assist in showing how is it going to assist in growing the economy, not only reducing the government borrowing. Because one would expect that now the foreign reserve would also look beyond that, also covering the way of, you know, improvement on the infrastructure investment. I wanted to say that, yes. So, but it's a really positive move direction that the government has taken. So that will be all from my side, Chair, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Honorable Kaiso. You see your network behaved. Honorable Mabiletsa, please come in.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, chairpersons, other chairpersons of finance committees. And I would like also to take this opportunity to welcome the budget that was presented by the minister yesterday, and also to thank, you know, the team, Treasury, and also to thank you, honorable members. I've got only two questions. And the first one is, should our orientation not be towards stimulating the demand side of the economy to push actual growth? And the other one, the proposals in budget 2024 propose growth. However, growth can be achieved without the necessary correlation in job growth. Has this been taken into consideration? And if so, where do we find this consideration in the budget? And also, I have got a request that Treasury should really continue to empower the municipalities to be able to spend the money, not to return it back. I don't know if you will just have a program, and that is our appeal, because everything now should be happening there in the municipalities. When we talk about job creation, when we talk about economy, it should start from there in the municipalities. So if we see other municipalities returning money back to the treasury, it's said. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mabiletsa. Let me just check. I don't have any other hand, honorable members. But before I allow the minister and the team to respond.
Chair?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
There's a hand from Honorable Sarupen.
Honorable Sarupen, please come in.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies about that. I'm just battling with my gadget because I have to use the tablet because of load shedding. Chair, I just have two questions. One is in relation to Transnet and the fact that it needed a bailout last year because it was going to be unable to meet its repayments on its debt that it has. What is the plan around Transnet? And considering this budget has no anticipation on bailouts for SOEs going forward, apart from, of course, the already passed appropriation bill for transferring ESCOM debt to the balance sheet, is this a commitment from the Treasury that there will be no further bailouts in the medium term, at least, based on this budget to state-owned companies? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Sarupen. Mashida, do I have any other hand? No.
No, we don't have any other hand, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Let me join the honorable members in welcoming the budget. As I said in my introduction, mainly we do welcome the over 900 billion rand infrastructure spend in the budget, which is very critical to jumpstart and ignite economic growth and thereby allowing us to have better revenues and better employment opportunities. Perhaps here's the question which comes from that, Honorable Minister, saying this is supposed also to crowd in private sector investment, but this has not happened at the pace which is supposed to. This is evident from the low private sector growth fixed capital formation, pulling down the total GFCF, which is still far from the 30% of GDP mark envisaged in the development plan. The question is, why is this happening and what can be done? Because as you know, we are too far from that, despite the year in, year out expenditure, infrastructure, we are unable to attract at the required rate the investment which were supposed to be crowded in by this infrastructure spend from government. Question 2, I just want to check, this is related to the question by Honorable Kaiso, and then I'm saying, are you not too aggressive in terms of pushing for primary balance in this financial year or the financial year that we are budgeting for, rather than pushing it out a little bit? You have just shared with us that you are projecting a 0.6% growth. And as you know, that we're faced with this stubborn unemployment as released, the figures as released by Stats SA on Tuesday. And again, this is happening within a high interest rate environment. I'm saying, aren't we too aggressive on this? I would like to hear you, Minister and the team. Question 2 is related to Honorable Muletsane's question. We're told that about 300 to 350 young doctors who have done their internship and community service and who are not, who can't be absorbed by the system. I understand that the recommended doctor to patient ratio by the World Health Organization is 1:1,000. But in South Africa, we've got 1:3,000. So there is no doubt that we need more doctors even to have this deficit in terms of the doctors. Further, I understand that training a doctor in South Africa will at least cost 1 million rand. So if you have got 350 doctors who are on the streets, it will mean that about 350 million rand have been money down the drain. In the accountants speak, it may qualify itself to be called a wasteful expenditure. So I'm just trying to get a minister. How much will it take to absorb these doctors? Not just that they need employment, but our people need their services there. I think we are still going to be interacting with Treasury. We're going to be very strong on this one, Minister, that please go back DG, and I think let's get money to try and absorb those young people on the streets. One, the investments that we have made to them. Two, the need of their services in our communities. I just want to check how much do we need to do that, and we are really insisting that please go back and sharpen your pens and try to get money to try and absorb these young people into the system. This is our investment that we have made. You are faced with what is called the Icarus paradox, where we've created problems ourselves by training more people who are victims of our success. So I think we need to deal with that. Otherwise, it becomes a disincentive to young people to go to school, especially for this very needed skill in our communities. Again, I think it's going to have a negative impact on the NHI that we're busy trying to introduce. So it's one thing that I'm alerting you now, Minister and your team, and that when it comes to the committee, definitely we'll still be saying more on this. I think this one is the last one. It will surprise you that it comes from me, but I would like to hear your take. We have intervened and recapitalized, bailed out some of the SOEs because of their importance in the economy. So I'm arguing that there are companies in the private sector which will be very critical for this economy and very critical, and who are getting into very, very difficult position. Have we ever considered of coming up with some innovative and strategic ways of intervening in those companies and helping them with whatever form of financial assistance? Obviously, I always stress that it can't be a blank check. But for me, let me make an example. Tongat Hewlett in KZN, although there's now an investor, but its importance in our economy, but in that province and in terms of employment creation, direct and indirect, critical for agriculture, critical. Do we envisage some form of in such instances of intervening? I hold the view that it's better to protect something that you have rather than to start something new altogether. It won't be the first time that is done. You know that during the global economic financial crisis, government had to intervene to assist many companies because they were pulling the economy down. Do we envisage such a thing? It's always private sector coming to get something from us and so on. How about the opposite direction? I'm sure you would have heard that the steel industry is going under is going through a very difficult period. As a result, Saldanha Steel, the West Coast, Highveld Steel in Mpumalanga, ArcelorMittal in KZN, they are either in the process of shutting down or others have shut down. And strategically, steel is very critical for our developmental plans. And the employment that is being created in those areas, and the multiplier effects, negative multiplier effects when they go under. So I'm just saying, do we consider those things? Because the importance of those companies, may be as important as some of the SOEs that we intervene. Honourable Minister and the team, who are all yours, please help us with those questions, and you'll only bring back the meeting to me once we have dealt with all the questions with the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. The team is here to take some of these questions, but let me deal with a few of them. The first one is the issue of the doctors. But before dealing with that question, I want to raise a broad point, which in most of the discourse and conversation is absent. Are policy trade-offs. Are policy trade-offs. Those trade-offs relate to, if, for instance, you were to say, let's rate this, so you're losing revenue, we need to say, where should we get that revenue? Revenue forgone as a result of that. If, for instance, we're saying let's employ social workers, which I agree with, if we are committed, for instance, to gender-based violence, surely we should be having social workers in each and every police station, in my view. But something must go. Something must go. What is that something that must go? Should it be extended public works or anything? So the problem is, the envelope remains the same. It's not growing. And if we're then saying, so I'm raising that broad point that in most of our conversation, absence of that conversation are these policy trade-offs. Let me come to the issue of the doctors. My understanding, Chairperson, the issue of the doctors, there's a dispute about the number. The number that has been circulating in the social media has been 800. You, Chairperson, are saying it's 350. Health has got a different number. However, in the allocation we've given to health for personnel, Dr. Patla was convinced that that will also alleviate that problem. We will await the health department to come back to us on that issue. But that's where things stand at the moment. Insofar as Premier Lisifi's suggestion that is the billion rand for VAL, I don't know, maybe DTI has promised it. I can't answer that. From their respective incentive packages, I don't know anything about it, but it's not on my submissions. It holds. We had an agreement with the Premier of Gauteng, and that agreement is that we'll settle the debt 70-30 split. We have made our own commitment and gave Sandra money last year. The province is going to give us money. Secondly, the province is going to answer the question, who's going to do the maintenance? It's a discussion they're doing with the Department of Transport. So unless an agreement is tied down, I can't make a commitment as to when will the grantors go. To my knowledge is that first and foremost that what I call conditions precedent before you can do that. Signing that agreement, loan agreement, Gauteng government getting funding elsewhere if they don't have the resources from their own resources, getting funding somewhere, and then once that is in place, then you can start talking business. I can't comment further than that. I'm saying unless those conditions precedent are met, there's no way we can talk about dealing with that issue. The Your last point, Chair, about helping industries. I think the DTIC is sensitive with that. Let me just give you an example of with the two sectors you've raised. Tonga, to my knowledge, would have been closed now were it not for the state intervention in the form of both DPIC and IDC. They've been active, a part of the team that is supporting the liquidation and the business rescue for Tonga. An interesting point, the reason we've suspended any further increases on the sugar tax is precisely because of the challenges that we're facing in the sugar industry, particularly in KZN, and its impact on that. So some support is coming up, and part of these are different measures that we're doing in that industry. Again, I'm not qualified to talk about support for the steel industry as well. Let me make the following point. The steel industry has always enjoyed support for years. You will recall there was an incentive called GUICE. That incentive largely was consumed by ISCO, not by anybody else, which now is a Solomita. We've done everything, including raising tariffs and in costing local manufacturing in order to protect that industry. So there are challenges. We've got to weigh some challenges as to show what are the implications of this continued support. I don't know now when Mr. Patel is better placed to but I'm saying there has been always a willingness on government's part to support industry, where Mr. Patel is better placed to handle that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to ask the commissioner to do two issues. The first one is the question, where is the revenue going to come from? The second one is the base erosion issue. Thereafter, the DG and his team will try and respond to some of the questions. Commissioner?
Thank you, Minister. Just and good afternoon, honourable members. Let me deal with the first issue of where we think that
honourable members. Whoa, can you switch off the let's do that. Let's make sure, honourable members, that we don't disturb the commissioner. Is on the platform. Commissioner, please come in.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. So on the first issue, where we see opportunities for additional revenue, is we've seen great progress, measurable progress, in terms of a significant focus on compliance efforts. In the year that we have reported as of the end of January, we've seen about a 4% increase in compliance. The areas where that is focused on is in debt collection. To give members an example, that we have a debt book that is not disputed of about 300 billion rand. What is required to harvest that debt is focused efforts. Year to date, we have resolved over 2 million such cases, and just that work has resulted in an additional 70 billion rand that would otherwise not be in the fiscal numbers. That's one example. Another example is the work we do on data science and artificial intelligence. It is impossible for SARS to manually assess every return that is submitted to us. To give members a sense, year to date, we have had just short of 40 million returns submitted. Through the AI work we do, 1.5 million of those have been flagged as a risk to the refund system. Our staff then do further verification work, further engagement with taxpayers, and just that work has resulted in us preventing the outflow of about 66 billion rand. And I can make many other examples that says the opportunity landscape is there for us to improve our administrative efficiency through the investment we make into people, technology, and data. And if we do that, we are able to really deal with the tax gap, the compliance shortfall, and that has a sustainable revenue contribution that we believe over time will take off pressure of the minister to borrow money or to look for other more expensive sources of revenue. And I can unpack that further. There was a quick question on the impact of the 1% decline in tax percentage from 28 to 27. What I want to just say there, members will remember that will, for the first time, will have been implemented from the 1st of March 2023. And so SARS will begin to see the impact of that in the returns that will be submitted by these companies. And we will certainly report on this in general, but make a specific point to give more information to the members that asked that question. Year to date, we have added a further 342 companies that have paid an additional 35 million taxes paid. The big shift in the tax decline that we have seen was mainly from payments that didn't come from the mining, as was previously alluded to, but we also have seen decline in manufacturing and a decline in of about manufacturing and in transport. If I can come to issues of base erosion and related to that also illicit trade and financial flows. On base erosion, I think we're doing a lot of work in transfer pricing, and to link that back to the point of global minimum tax, South Africa will be a beneficiary in two ways. Firstly, companies who do aggressive tax planning, including the abuse of our transfer pricing laws, and through their aggressive planning, manage to get their effective tax rate below the statutory tax rate, regardless of what they report, will be required to pay a minimum tax of 15%. So if a company, for example, has managed to get the effective tax rate to 10%, we will still tax them on 15%, and that will be in the form of a top-up payment. That's the one area where we will benefit, and we've seen Treasury pencil in 8 billion in that regard. The second area where we will benefit is international companies who are domiciled elsewhere, like the Amazons and the Googles, who are economically active in South Africa but don't have a physical presence here, whereas traditionally the taxing right was determined by physical presence. The future taxing right will be determined by economic presence. And so when they have paid their minimum tax in their local jurisdiction, there'll be residual profits, and that will be allocated proportional to the economic presence. And so that will be the second opportunity that South Africa will have to claw back some of the base erosion that has come about as a result of aggressive tax planning and other transfer pricing issues. If I may then, Minister, just talk briefly on illicit trade and illicit financial flows. SARS deals with that in a number of areas, and let me touch on two. The first is our presence at ports of entry allow us to profile cargo that comes through the ports of entry even before they get there. They are supposed to make declarations of their imports before they get to the ports of entry. When SARS detects a risk, we are then able to intervene and hold the cargo until we have sufficiently done an inspection. Just this past year, that work has resulted in us in intervening in 5,000 instances with goods across various sectors to the value of 5 billion rand. And the collective work we have done in customs compliance management have resulted in us preventing the outflow of 7.5 billion through leakage prevention and added a further 3 billion rand of cash into our customs revenues. We also, members will know, have a division that is responsible for syndicated tax and customs crimes, specifically focused on illicit trade. There we have had 848 detentions, including, as was widely publicized, the focus on tobacco, and that work has resulted in a almost 14 billion revenue impact, of which a significant portion is already in the numbers. I want to single out two things quickly. The first is on state capture. We have 140 state capture audit cases currently undergo. We have completed 27 of those cases, and we also have handed over 32 cases to the NPA. And members will know, once we've handed the case to the NPA, we are then in the hands of the Hawks and of the NPA for those cases to be brought to court. In terms of illicit financial flows, we also now have improved our system to do real-time matching. When taxpayers import goods, they apply to the Reserve Bank for an advance payment approval, and they would then make the payment to an offshore service provider, specifically for capital goods and services. SARS then, when the goods come in, receive the customs declaration. So we see instances where a company may apply for 100 million rand payment, but when the goods are declared, it's only 80 million. And so you can argue that the 20 million is an illicit offshore financial flow to fund other nefarious or questionable activities. We are improving our information exchange with the Reserve Bank to pick that up more proactively, and that will also strengthen our ability as part of our work towards FATF ungrey listing, part of our work to strengthen our system of managing the integrity of financial flows. For passengers, we also now have a real-time link between SARS and the FIC when passengers are alerted when they declare on the cash on income. That's automatically then communicated to the FIC to also strengthen the management of financial flows into the country. We pause there, Minister, and thank you, Chair.
Let me just deal with the NHI issue before. Let's put the following. I mean, the NHI is still going to be assented to by the head of state. Once that is done, a whole range of legislative arrangements will kick in, including the funding models that are being proposed there in the NHI. So at the moment, what we're trying to say to health, we will focus on upgrading we'll do those preliminary things, including upgrading the infrastructure in preparation for that rollout. Otherwise, the actual costing and taxations and so on will come later. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Just to deal, Honourable Chair, with your permission, just to deal with some of those other questions. There were a few questions on growth, including whether the 1.6 GDP growth rate is achievable, as well as how we should support growth, amongst others. So I would like Boipuso Modise, our Head of Economic Policy, to come in on those and other questions, and then I'll hand over to some of the other colleagues to deal with the others. Boipuso?
Good morning, DGs. Good morning, DG. Good morning, honorable members. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My apologies, afternoon, actually. So a couple of questions were asked to us on growth. I would like to respond to them in turn. I think the first are sort of more conceptual questions regarding our sense of growth, the importance of it, and what we need to do to ignite it. I think the DG was very correct in his opening remarks when he reflected in our view on the three things that we need in order to put ourselves on a sustainable, higher growth trajectory that is more inclusive and results in increased employment creation. And those three things are, firstly, a stable macroeconomic framework. As honorable members would know, for the past several years now in the budget documentation, we've been very clear on indicating the importance of a stable macroeconomic framework as foundational to creating jobs, to creating growth, not just in the near term, but also over the medium term and over the long run, which we think is critical. To augment that, we think structural reforms, especially in network industries that have been constraining growth, are really important. DG spoke to them in the presentation, where we gave a bit of a progress update on the quarter. But these are broader, and we've spoken to them over several iterations of the budget documentation. As honorable members will recall, we even published a waterfall chart that gave a clear sense of what kinds of interventions we thought would be important and how long and the type of gains to growth that they could provide. We'd indicated that we thought that potential growth could be north of 3% if we were able to implement all of those reforms expeditiously and in a sequenced way. That we spoke to. And the third component speaks to elements that have come up, not just in the budget documentation, but also in the conversations thus far through the questions and answers. And they speak to elements related to the capacity and the capability of the state to provide the necessary goods and services that it should, including things like ensuring that we are more effective at using the resources that we allocate towards infrastructure and ensuring that that infrastructure actually results in economic activity that is supportive of our growth and inclusiveness prospects over time. So those are the three elements in our views that are critical to implementing or achieving sustained growth over time. And those are detailed in very specific and granular detail in Chapter 2 and also previous iterations of the budget documentation. In the interest of time, I won't go into it, but it's important to go through that overview and be very clear that those are the three elements that we think are critically important for sustaining and harnessing growth. The Honourable Okamp asked a very pointed question on our sense of the 0.6% forecast number in year and over the medium term. So we give a very comprehensive sense of the elements that speak to growth over the medium term and in year from a domestic demand perspective, but also from a net trade perspective, which speaks to our sense and view of the global economy, which we've spoken to, the DG spoke to them in the presentation in quite some detail, and we also give further clarification in the book itself. But I think the thing that's really important to speak to here, and I think the question speaks to forecast quality and whether or not the Treasury is capable of producing or is confident of the forecast that it produces. The short answer is we are. These are our first best estimates. They are produced by skilled individuals who are trained to produce these forecasts. We use tools that are in line with international and domestic best practice, and we've got processes that ensure that our forecasts are as accurate as we can get them. We take comfort in the fact that analysis, not just internally, but also by external forecasters or people who look at the quality of forecasts, have indicated that our forecasts are as good as and sometimes better than our competitors, or other forecasters who would have views on these issues. So from that perspective, our view is that our forecasts are as good as any other, and we're very confident in those outcomes. However, as we all know, there are several things that can affect outcomes, including economic shocks, which we've seen several of over the past several years, issues with data, etc. These are not unique to the Treasury. They're things that affect forecasters generally. And in our view, the estimates that we've put forward are our first best estimate. They are informed by the assumptions and the narrative that we provide and put forward in Chapter 2 and in the book more generally. Despite this, I think, just to reiterate before I close, what we think is critically important is that we stick to these three elements that we think are critical for supporting growth. Again, a stable macroeconomic framework, and for the a stable macroeconomic framework, structural reforms to support them by addressing key constraints, especially in network industries, because they're so important for economic growth and improving state capacity and capability. I'll leave it there, DG, but if there are any other questions, I'm happy to come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Boybuso. Honorable Chair, there were also a few questions on the fiscal side, including our approach on the primary balance, and other questions, I'm going to ask Edgar Sishi, the head of the budget office, to come in on those questions, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. So on the primary fiscal surplus, let me just start by indicating, as the DG showed in the presentation, the starting point here, and we explain it in some detail in Chapter 1. I would refer honourable members to that explanation in terms of why we are targeting a primary fiscal surplus and why it's beneficial for the economy. We answer exactly that question in Chapter 1, but let me summarize it this way. As DG indicated, the debt service costs, the cost of servicing government debt has now risen to 356 billion rand in the current year. And this debt service cost essentially has two characteristics that are important for the integrity of the budget and for service delivery. The first is that at 356 billion rands, the debt service costs crowd out service delivery spending. So to the extent that we have to pay these debt service costs, that's money that we're not able to put into extending those services, whether it's in health, education, and so forth. The second characteristic of high debt service costs is that they constrain investment and growth, and the high debt levels constrain economic recovery because investors who lend to South Africa demand a premium to compensate them for investing, for the risks of investing in a country with high debt. And that's reflected in the high debt service costs. And so we have to address that. And the way you address that is by stabilizing debt as a percentage of GDP. And we have been targeting the stabilization of debt as a percentage of GDP in 25-26. And we've had that target in place since 2020. And the way you do that is by tabling a primary fiscal surplus that is large enough in order for debt to stabilize. That is the reason for a primary fiscal surplus. And the primary surplus also has to rise over time in order for you to stabilize debt. Otherwise, you require a very dramatic and large adjustment on your expenditure in a very short period of time that could be even more damaging to service delivery. And so for that reason, we have tabled a fiscal framework with that level of the primary balance, as you see in the budget. Thanks. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Edgar. Apologies, Chair. We were just unmuting on this side. Thank you, Edgar. Honourable Chair, with your permission, I just wanted to check with Chris whether there are any outstanding tax issues that he wanted to comment on. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. There were just a couple. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, honourable members. I'll just go through them very quickly, given the time. The one was on the buoyancy, and are we expecting revenue just to go back to the heydays of higher commodity prices? No, it's because of the increase in the revenue that was announced in the budget that has increased that buoyancy, as well as some other one-off impacts, such as the withdrawals on the two-pot system, which we think will lead to a slightly higher revenue, as well as revisions in the estimates of compensation of employees, which would increase personal income tax. On the solar rebates, that still applies for businesses. You can claim 125% accelerated depreciation. On the global minimum tax, I know the Commissioner did also talk about this. 140 other countries have signed up to this. I think almost 30 have already implemented it. So even if we don't implement this global minimum tax, they will then make top-up payments to other countries. So if we implement it, then we can get the revenue. If we don't, then other countries will get the revenue. There shouldn't be an impact from a tax perspective on the MNEs, the multinational enterprises. So we don't believe there'll be an impact on investment. For consumers, we did try to provide relief by not adjusting the fuel levy on illicit financial flows as well. I know the Commissioner said a lot, but we're also doing a lot of work through FATF by trying to improve the effectiveness of measures to try and combat financial crime, corruption. We're trying to create more better use of beneficial ownership registers, as well as using improved data to assist with investigations. On the corporate income tax decrease, I also would just like to mention that this was done as a package. So at the same time as reducing the rate, we also increased or broadened the base. We reduced the ability of companies to use assessed losses, and we started taxing excessive interest deductions, which would both increase revenue at the same time as the reduction in the headline corporate income tax rate. This should lead to a generally neutral or no impact on overall revenues if you look at the package overall together, but it will make us more globally competitive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Finally, on our side, Makhoshi, our head of asset and liability management, I wonder if you'd like to come in on one or two of the questions on the SOEs and anything you'd like to add on JFECRA before I come in with final remarks. Makhoshi?
Thank you, DG. Let me start with JFECRA. There was a question on when will we get details of the settlement agreement with the SAP. The response is that we are almost there. We've finalized the details. We have announced that it will be released publicly. So as soon as the minister and the governor have signed the settlement agreement, we have committed to have it released publicly. And the other question on the SOEs, with regard to Transnet, yes, indeed, the minister has not announced that there will be a bailout. And for us, this is a commitment that we're making, that until Transnet meets the conditions that are attached to the guarantee framework agreement, we are not willing to have any discussions with Transnet on a potential bailout. Thank you. Oh, Chair, there was also a question on why is Eskom not selling the Eskom Finance Company. Our understanding, and it will be good if I think Chair and members could help us, if this question could be directed at Eskom, because they have missed the initial deadline that we were given. However, our understanding from their side is that they have struggled to find a buyer, given that this is a unique company, not similar to how it's managed. Therefore, they are in discussions with the Eskom Pension Fund, who have expressed interest in acquiring the company. And they have committed to us that those discussions are also advanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Makhoshi. Mampo, from your side on the spending questions, anything that you wanted to come in on?
Thanks, DG. Good morning, honorable members and chairpersons. DG, Minister covered the NHI question and the SANRAL question, so I think we covered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mampo. Madi Jeng, our head of IGR, any comments on the question around the empowering of municipalities?
Thank you, DG.
Obviously, honorable members, good. Abu, am I okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Honorable members, good afternoon, and thank you very much. I think the issue of the spending of particularly on infrastructure by municipalities, it is a challenge, and I think it breaks our hearts also when we see the money that is very limited already not actually being spent, which also would reflect that part of the big problem that we face is not so much money, even though we do need more money. So there is a big concern about that, and there is, efforts that have been made even through, if you look at infrastructure and local government through MISA and all those efforts. But those efforts are not often yielding results because I think if within the municipality, there isn't good governance that enables delivery in terms of the skills that are required, then that becomes a bit of a challenge. But it's something that we are working on with other stakeholders in order to make sure that we are getting value for the money that we are spending, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madijeng. Chair, there were only 2 outstanding questions, according to my notes, for me to respond to. One was a question by Honorable Ryder, I believe it was, about why the need for a contingency reserve when JFECRA is already sitting on the balance sheet of the Reserve Bank. The simple answer to that, and fiscal accounting and central bank accounting can sometimes be complicated, but the simple answer is that JFECRA actually sits as a liability on the books of the Reserve Bank and as a contingent asset on the books of the National Treasury. And so in order to add to the contingency reserves of the Reserve Bank, we are having to table the JFECRA Defrail Act, which will allow us to increase the contingency reserve of the Reserve Bank by 100 billion and ensure that their equity is preserved and that their solvency is not compromised. There was another question by Honorable Ryder on how does one actually realize these gains if you are not going to sell any reserves. And the answer to that, Honorable Ryder, is that the Reserve Bank will expand the liquidity to the market via the banking system and allow the funds to reach the National Treasury in that way through the tax and loan accounts that are part of the National Revenue Fund. However, because this comes with the associated costs called sterilization costs, they are then going to require the contingency reserve in order to implement liquidity management measures to manage the interest rate impact of this. That includes the interest rate that they pay on excess reserves at the repo rate, but it also includes potentially draining a portion of those funds using the corporation for public deposits. Hence the repeated statement by the governor and ourselves that there is a cost associated with accessing these funds, and those costs have to be paid. Thank you, Honourable Chairs. I believe we have covered the questions that were asked. Back to the Minister.
Minister.
Follow-up. Chair.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Chair.
Yeah, please just hold on. Honorable Mahlangu, are you still there? Honorable Mahlangu? Honorable Mahlangu, are you still there? Okay. Let me see whose hand is this.
It's me, Chair. Thandi.
Okay, Honorable Tobias.
Chair, please allow me to make a follow-up on the response that just came through on the
contingency reserves. I want to understand if you need to have contingency reserves for the Reserve Bank, does it mean you have to have contingent liabilities? The answer has made me confused. Can that be clarified? Why will we have to have contingent for the Reserve Bank? Is that not overstating its capability or what you have invested? Thank you very much. Chair, I'm done. I don't know if you copied me.
I think they heard you. Honorable Daiso, quickly.
Yeah, the Chair. I don't think I was answered on the issue on the corporate taxes because they have been reduced. But now my question was, to what an extent is an assessment being able to be made in as far as the private sector contribution as these are being reduced? Because I think it's very, very much important to understand that to what an extent has an assessment been made to see to that much as the reduction has been done, but there is private investment increased, And secondly, is on the issue of, I was asking whether are there possibilities for Treasury to tap in the issue or on the government employee pension fund for industrialization and capitalize DFIs and stimulate economy. I was just asking those specific questions. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Chairperson Yunus Karim, please come in.
Thank you. No, just a quick question. Given the importance of Transnet to the economy and much else, obviously one agrees in broad terms with the Treasury's conditions for bailouts, but perhaps they can just tell us how much does Treasury do working with Transnet to ensure that they do meet those conditions? Thank you very much.
Honorable Karim, thank you. Thank you so much. DG, back to you. Quickly, the questions which have been raised by the honorable members.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think let me deal with three of them, and then I'll ask Chris to come in as well, because I think it's important for us to explain to honorable members that when we reduced the corporate income tax rate, we also implemented certain base broadening measures to ensure that overall impact of the reduction in the corporate income tax rate is not negative for revenue. But I'll ask Chris to come back on that. In terms of the contingency reserve, does the 100 billion that we transferred to the Reserve Bank via the Jafekra Defrayal Act create a contingent liability for the state? No, it does not. In terms of Transnet, the question by Honorable Karim, how closely do we monitor the conditions? The honorable members will know we did present on these conditions to Parliament, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that we indicated at the time was that we don't want to get to a situation that we sometimes find ourselves in, which is where very close to a date by which a particular condition is supposed to be achieved, we suddenly realize that the condition is at risk of being met. And so what we've done is we've instituted a committee between Treasury, the Transnet and the DPE, which ensures that there are regular conversations about these conditions. And of course, many of the conditions are also monitored through the NLCC, the National Logistics Crisis Committee, which ensures that there's regular reporting by Transnet on those conditions. I believe the minister will come back on the issue of how one can leverage the reserves sitting with DFIs and others for industrialization. But I just want to check quickly with Chris whether he wants to add anything on the relationship between the CIT reduction and the impact on revenue and private investment. Chris?
Not too much from what you have mention. Thanks, DG. So, it was done as a package so that the overall revenue impact should be very minimal. It was more to try and improve competitiveness, but those two measures were a limitation on the use of assessed losses for companies, so they couldn't use those assessed losses, which would then mean we would get more revenue from that, and a limitation on excessive interest deductions, so we would get more revenue from that as well. And we tried to structure it so that the increase in revenue from those two measures would exactly offset the reduction in the corporate income tax. Thank you.
Okay. Before the minister, I'm sure it's DG's minister is going to come in now, but I wanted to say something before he comes in so that he can comment. Am I right?
Okay.
Okay.
What? Yes,
okay.
yes, Chair.
Thank you again, Minister DG and your team. Minister, as you make your closing remarks, or perhaps even before I come to you, Honorable Dr. DM Masondo, anything from you? Okay. No, Minister, as you make your closing remark, please comment on the progress that we have made as far as compliance with the FATF conditions and stroke the grey listing position, the progress that we've made. Thank you. Please proceed, Honorable Minister. Minister, I'm sure you're okay.
Yeah, the video is on. Yeah.
Yeah, video. And video there.
No, yeah. Thank you, Chairperson. Let me first start by
Minister,
the first question asked.
Can you see your face, please?
You can't say.
Sigbon.
Oh, what is that word there? Huh? Ulumba. I'll try to get somebody to show my face.
They always try ask us at ICT and communications that we try if we don't have a problem of.
I'm in trouble. The committee members want to see my face.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, can you see me now?
So the food. Nakho siyakubona manje.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, members of the committee. Let me just say we appreciate with all of the questions and comments. The first, they've been dealt with. One of the questions I need to deal with, which was a direct question from Honorable George. The question was, have you agreed with the governor? The answer is yes. But what we have not agreed on are the modalities which the teams are working on. We have agreed that this is the route we should take. And he was addressing the press conference with me yesterday. But our teams are working on the modalities coming between us to and forth on the formulations and wording. Who should do what? Who should be responsible for what? That's what is going to be contained in the memorandum of agreement. Once that memorandum of agreement is finalized by the team, the governor and I will sign it. That's the first question. The second one relates to what Honorable Kais was raising, the pension funds. Now, one of the key issues, I was debating this issue this morning. The key issue is pensioners want a reasonable return on their pensions. Want a reasonable return on their pensions. And therefore, it's not purely that you can simply dip and get them. You must also be committed to be competitive in terms of the return you're going to provide to pensioners. That's the first principle I want to make. The second issue I want to make is that we have been discussing with the top pension funds in the country, particularly the first 40, about what is the best way of them funding infrastructure. We are almost close in finalizing that in terms of what institutional they are quite keen, because regulation 28 require them to set aside certain investment for infrastructure. The key question: what are the best institutional arrangements for them, other than simply going to the market and buy bonds? So we're closer to stitching really in that direction. Then the last question was from the chair.
FATF.
FATF. What I want us to do, Honorable Chair and members, if we're to shelve this matter, even if it's for next few weeks, because as we speak, FATF plenary is in session this week, and Momo and them are there attending the FATF plenary. It will be useful to provide you with an updated version, which I undertake to make soon.
Perfect.
I would like us to do that.
Perfect. It's okay.
Let me then say, first and foremost, thank the chairpersons. I forgot yesterday to make reference to the NCOP chairs, who have also been quite helpful in supporting us. I must make the point that my chairpersons from both houses have been supportive, and my apologies for not mentioning them yesterday, and even today I forgot to make reference to them. My
too late,
apologies.
Chairperson, too late. You must expect a lawyer's letter.
I'll have to kind of make a plea of whatever plea that I've got to make in the form of an admission. I'll do that, Chairperson. But otherwise, we appreciate it, and thanks, and thanks the joint committees for this engagement. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Minister, DG, and the team, Commissioner, for engaging the committees. Thank you, co-chairpersons. Thank you, honorable members, for engaging with Team Treasury. As we said, that the environment in which the budget was being presented is a very trying environment, and we thank.
Is it my side or?
No, there's a problem with
We've lost the chairperson.
Just mute us for now.
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, thank you. I was then saying that let's go to the next agenda item. Let me start with you, Mr. Mashile. Are there any announcements that you want to make?
Thank you very much, Chair. The only announcement is that we are meeting next week. The same committees will be having a joint briefing from the FFC and the PBO on the 2024 national budget at 9 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Alan? Anything from
No
us?
announcements. No announcement from my side, Chair.
Thank you.
Hi, Chair.
Hi, Alan.
From the side of the Select Committee on Finance, we're having public hearings on the public procurement bill tomorrow at 9 o'clock, Chair. That's announcement.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. I think I've checked with all the committees. Am I right about the announcements? Okay. Anything from Select Committee on Appropriations? Nothing.
No, nothing, Chairperson. I'm covered. Thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you to all of you, honorable members, and thanks to you, our support staff. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Long live the chair.
Thank you.